Hi guys, today we have a guest, Josh Wilburne, product designer at Facebook London. Hi Josh,
Hey,
how you doing?
doing well. How you doing?
Great, as great as we can currently in a lockdown.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, so how London is during those days? This recording was made at the beginning of April, just for listeners.
Yeah, London's good. Like, I think we're all past the novelty of like working from home, and everyone's sort of in the dredges of like proper lockdown. It's a little weird because we've been in winter for a while, and now we're like just starting to come out of winter, and it's starting to get some nice sunny days. So I'm sitting in my living room looking out the window of these like beautiful sunny days, and you're itching to get outside, but you
Yeah,
can't. And you shouldn't. I mean, they're not, I wouldn't say they're really strictly policing it at the moment, but there's a lot of like self-policing going on. And, I'll walk my dog and you see some runners and stuff, but not that many people out. Not nearly like it was even, 3 weeks ago.
yeah, I think it will be more pain soon because it's just the beginning of the spring, so it will be even more tough to sit at home.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be rough for a while, I think. But it's fine. Like I have food, I have toilet paper, my kids happy, like it's fine.
Have you read those articles when people say that, oh, now I have at home a lot of time to do everything, to do yoga, read books, and I know, like, meditate, etc. So, how about you?
Well, I have a son who is turning 2 at the beginning of June. So my free time is non-existent right now because I'm still trying to work. And obviously there's no childcare, so he's amazing, but he's in this like developmental stage where he just wants to be around us and engaging at all times. And he's got a lot of separation anxiety for me. So if I leave the room to even like use the toilet, he freaks out. So I have to have him sit on my lap during video calls. I mean, I've started taking like 2 days off a week just to manage the house because between my wife and I both working full time, like it was impossible to even do laundry because it is a full-time job. Like there's a reason that childcare is a full-time job,
Yeah.
and there's a reason that my job is a full-time job, and trying to do two full-time jobs simultaneously is really hard. So free time right now is way less than it was before lockdown. Yeah, we're getting by. Like I said, we got food, we got toilet paper. My house is not nearly where it was before all this happened, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think there will be a place for a workshop how to manage your business or to do your work and raise your kids during the lockdown.
Yeah, if anything, it made me feel like I'm underpaying our daycare. Like I should be giving them a raise after this because I only have there's two of us and one of him, and they have like the opposite ratio of one of them to two kids. And I just can't imagine. But they also got a bunch of toys, and they have like a slide there and all sorts of like. Right now, he's climbing on the furniture. He's like ripping things off the wall. He's getting a little rabid. So we're we're getting there.
Yeah, no, I have seen a couple of stories, like real stories, on Instagram when people just tied the kids literally and just doing their job in the parallel. And kids, they are having fun actually because it's great. They thought that it's like a game, so okay, I can just lay down on the floor and just see how my father or mother is working. So
Yeah, yeah. He sits on my lap for most of my calls now. And I have to turn off so I have like a separate Bluetooth keyboard. I have to turn the Bluetooth off so that way he can sit there and just slam on the keys. And he's got this little toy truck that he likes to just roll back and forth across the keyboard. And then occasionally he'll go up to my laptop and do it, and I gotta like put off because he'll end up unmuting me naturally, and then he's yelling, and it's a whole thing. But he's been like a special guest in pretty much every video call. It's me and every other parent, I feel like.
yeah, it could be an impression that you got drunk actually at home, that you're writing something on, like, on your laptop.
Yeah, exactly. I don't mind him being there. Everyone has been really supportive about it, which I appreciate a lot. Like my manager is super supportive. He's got an older kid. Everyone on the team's been like really supportive in helping pick up some work for me because they realize the position I'm in. I also kind of enjoy having him there as like a little bit of a reminder to everyone, be like, this is the reality of it. Um, it's not like if I didn't have a kid, I think it would be a lot easier to work from home. I mean, I know it would be. And I would enjoy the focus time. And I would used to really enjoy like going to cafes to work because it gave me like non-distracted focus time. I don't get that now because it's you're just watching the kid. So I kind of enjoy him being a reminder as well to everyone. Not that they need it, but it's my little like, by the way, this is still real life that we're dealing with.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, that's why childcare is a full-time job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, our nannies deserve a raise for sure.
Yeah. So okay. So we will talk a bit regarding the early start of your career and the whole path. I mean, your career path, and you have a really impressive experience. You work for Lyft, Twitter, Zero, Beyond, and it's really great list of companies. So, how have you started your career as a designer?
Yeah, my background, I'm a little bit older than some people who are in the field now. So when I went to college, um, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and the idea of like an app designer wasn't a thing yet because I graduated high school in 2003. Um, so the iPhone didn't come out till what, 2006, 2000, yeah, I think it was 2006. No, 2008. Um, yeah, so the iPhone didn't come out till 2008. So that was a big gap, and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do right out of high school. My dad's a truck driver, so I come from very like working class roots. So I was the first of my family to go to college right after high school. I kind of fucked around for a bit. I thought maybe I wanted to be an architect because I was good at math, but I wanted to do something creative. And then I realized that architecture school is 5 years and I didn't want to have to put in that much effort. So then I decided I want to be a photographer. And I did like maybe 6 months of photography classes. And I realized that I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. And you make basically no money doing it. And I had this like grand dreams of being like a photojournalist and traveling the world. But the realities were like, no one really gets to do that. And you're just broke and sort of getting by. And it was like a very scary reality. And then I started a job at the Apple store back in the early days when everyone just called it the iPod store, way before the iPhone. And a friend of mine was actually studying graphic design at the local art school there. So he was like, "Yo, dude, you should check this out." I When I was younger, I was really into punk, and I was really into like punk zines. I used to make punk zines as a kid, and a girl I dated in high school had this like punk zine that she ran, and like I had always like loved it. I didn't realize graphic design was a career. So I talked to the school, I ended up getting in. I studied graphic design for what ended up taking me almost 6 years because I had to get a job full time and I worked full time all through college and I ended up going to college 3/4 time. So I was working at the Genius Bar full time. And then my 2 days off a week and every night I was in school. So I graduated at like 25 with a degree in print design. And by that point, the iPhone had come out. Everything in the like tech world was really taking off. So I got my first job as a print designer for a documentary series, a television series. And I did that for a couple years, and I realized like, actually, I don't know if I want to do this forever. Print design, I love it. There are things I really miss about it, but it's a hard field to be in, and the world is changing, and I recognize that. Especially with the launch of the iPhone, like everything was changing. At the time, my wife and I were also, well, my girlfriend at the time, we were living in Orange County, which is south of LA. And we didn't really like it there. We weren't too happy. So I took her on a trip to San Francisco And I proposed to her, and I was like, "Hey, I really want to get to a city, like a real city." And our short list was basically San Francisco or New York. So I started applying to jobs in both of those places, and I got a offer from a small agency called Beyond as like a junior designer, and it was a web designer job. I sort of bluffed my way through some stuff. I made some fake like web design things. I didn't really know what I was doing, but they took a chance on me, and it was like a super junior role. I was a production designer, and that was my first like real digital job. So I moved to San Francisco. I was there. They gave me the job offer on like a Tuesday. I was there the next Friday. Uh, Left my girlfriend to pack up all of our stuff, and she finally forgave me for
Real
this. Yeah,
adventure.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We moved to SF, and I didn't move there for the tech scene. I just got lucky that we moved there right as this like new wave of the tech
Hmm.
scene was taking off. So we were there early enough that we moved there in 2011, the end of 2011, I think. And this was like before Uber was a thing. I had to like call cabs. This was before Yelp really existed. Like all these things were new. So we were there during like the heyday of this explosion of tech, and that was great. It was great for my career one, but that was just like a really exciting time to be in tech. And I realized that as I got into it, like this was really what I was passionate about. I love technology. I love gadgets. Ever since I was a little kid, I've loved gadgets. And it took me sort of a weird roundabout way to fall into that.
Yeah.
So at Beyond, I just worked my ass off. It was an agency. It was classic agency life. Like you work hard. They were pretty good about not working too many weekends, but we did weekends. Like a pitch comes in and it's all hands on deck. And um, I still think it was the best thing for my career was starting at an agency. Um, it gives you the opportunity to work with companies that I probably never would have been able to otherwise. So working at Beyond, one of my first projects was for YouTube, which was huge because I went from like, a small print designer doing a couple DVD packaging to like, oh shit, we're like building stuff for YouTube. Um, yeah, and that was amazing. And at that point, I was just doing production design work, but I just worked really hard to learn a lot. And at Beyond, I was able to work with like some incredible clients. We worked with Google, we worked with Facebook, Samsung. Just I didn't work on Virgin, but they worked on a lot of Virgin stuff. So it was like a lot of these like really recognizable brands. And it was only because I got into this agency and they took a chance on me. And that was like that completely opened up a lot of my career and that let me build up a portfolio of work that I don't think I would have been able to do otherwise. So I was at Beyond for a few years. I eventually worked my way up to art director. And I worked for about a year on this one big project for Google. And at the time, the agency industry is starting to shift. So we at Beyond, we were sort of a more traditional like digital agency. We would build splash pages, we build marketing sites, things like that. But the entire agency industry is starting to shift more towards product design. And Frog and IDEO had been doing this forever. But I think a lot of agencies were starting to recognize that product design was the next big wave in the agency world to make one to for them to sort of stay alive and make money, and two, it's just it's a field that's growing and really starting to thrive and sort of get into its stride. So at Beyond, we started to shift into product work the same time that I started to learn more about product work and get out of this traditional graphic design, visual design only, and really focus on product design. So I spent about a year on this big Google project where we were building an app for them. So yeah, it was basically an app for Google and some of their partners that no longer exists. But at the time, the agency was really doubling down on rebranding itself as a product agency. And I worked in the San Francisco office. There were two designers, me and my buddy Troy. So we weren't a big agency by any means, but we were able to kind of punch above our weight and really like produce some good work. So off the back of that, I was able to design this app for Google. And at the time, I realized that I kind of wanted to go in house. I was really struggling with the client relationship because the struggle with agency work is it's sort of a double-edged sword, but on the one hand, you get to do a lot of new stuff all the time, and it's really fun and exciting. But on the other hand, you have no ownership on things, and you don't get to actually push. You can try and convince, but it's really hard to actually put a stake in the ground and push. And I was getting really frustrated where we would make these decisions that I just felt were wrong and would oftentimes end up getting proven wrong. But you're still in a service relationship. And at the end of the day, like you need to retain this client or none of us have jobs. So if the client really pushes on this thing, then we're going to do the thing. So I was getting frustrated with this whole lack of ownership, and I decided to just start looking elsewhere. And I ended up getting an offer from Zero to be their second mobile designer in the States. So it was me and my buddy John who were the two mobile designers. And I went there for a little while. It wasn't exactly what I had hoped it would be, but it helped push me to kind of explore. And I thought, okay, maybe I don't want to do a bigger company. So I went to Peer, which was a tiny little startup. And this startup, the founder was this guy George who was the COO of Salesforce, and he left Salesforce to start this company. And our whole goal, and I still feel really strongly about it, and I don't think anyone's done it right yet, is that our premise was basically the performance review as a concept is a broken concept. You get feedback twice a year if you're lucky. Most people are only at companies for like 2 to 3 years. So that means you're getting feedback 4 to 6 times in your entire tenure at a company. And that's not super helpful to help you like sort of assess and grow. Um, so we built a like really lightweight ongoing feedback tool. It was mobile first, which I really liked. My whole North Star when designing it was that it would be something you could do in between meetings walking down the hallway. And our big like smart thing that we did, and I haven't seen anyone do, is we built a social graph intelligently. So we looked at who you're working with, and the engineers were amazing guys, and they basically built a social graph who could smartly tell who you had been meeting with, who you'd been emailing with, who you're messaging on Slack, and be like, cool, you've been working with Josh a bunch lately. You haven't given him feedback in a while. Like, give him some feedback. How's he been doing? And then the nice hook was that to see your feedback, you had to give other people feedback. It built like this. We were trying to build culture of feedback. It's a really hard space. The feedback and performance tool space is a hard place to be in. Um, and then eventually we were at a point where we were running out of money and we had a decision to make, which was try and raise another round or talk to some of the companies who had approached us. So we started talking to a few companies. Long story short, we ended up getting acquired by Twitter. Um, and that was for me really exciting because this was my first like actual step into a big company. It was a big move. I had, from the outside, you always look at these big companies and you're like, oh, I would love to work there. And I kind of ended up there in a like funny roundabout way. I still had to interview through the acquisition process. They still had to basically be like, yeah, they vetted me. I'm good enough to get in. And that was nice and validating. Uh, and yeah, I ended up at Twitter for a couple years. I worked on direct messaging. My big project that I worked on was when we doubled the character count from 140 to 280. That was my project. That was a really fun one. I did that for a couple years. I decided that I wanted to try to move to New York. I tried to do it inside of Twitter. It wasn't going to work. Um, and my old manager at Twitter and a couple of friends from Twitter actually had moved over to Lyft, and they were like, "Hey, man, like we're hiring. We're probably going to grow the New York team. Why don't you come here and find
Such a
out?"
great coincidence.
Yeah. So I ended up going to Lyft, and I worked with my old manager, who became my new manager again. My old PM became my PM again. Some like buddies had come over. Like you know, when you start to find good people around you, you oftentimes will run into them again, especially in Silicon Valley. Um, so a lot of people jump ship and follow friends, and they follow good people. So you can't be an asshole because it will follow you. Um, so yeah, I ended up at Lyft for a while, and then out of the blue, I got a recruiter email from some other company based in London, which is not my current employer. And my wife and I had always talked about moving to London. It was basically like we were ready to get out of SF. We At this point we'd been there almost 10 years, or I guess I guess it was like nine, almost 9 years.
I'm just curious, and
Yeah.
why did you have such kind of thoughts? It's very interesting that a lot of people, they are always thinking that, oh, actually, like living in London, maybe I need to move to US, and then like vice versa. And what was in your situation?
Yeah. Um, San Francisco is um is a very exciting place to live, and it's a very hard place to live. And it's I like to call it a beautiful shithole because there are things that are you'll be there and you're sitting at Dolores Park on a Saturday and it's the sun's out and it's beautiful weather and you're like, this is incredible. And then you turn around and there's a dude like shitting on the side of the train tracks. And it's like, okay, right. This is also reality. It has a big homeless problem. It has a big like substance abuse problem. There's like a mental health crisis on the streets, and you see it every day. And the reality is, it's crazy expensive to live there. Even making a very good salary, I made a good tech worker salary, and my wife worked at a startup. She made good money. We were priced out of buying anything. Like you basically need to hit the startup lottery. And my acquisition I actually didn't make any money on, um, so I didn't even get the startup lottery. I did get go through an acquisition. We got acquired, but I didn't make any money on it. Um, so like it's a really hard thing to sit here and you look on paper, you're like, what the heck, man? Like we're making such good money. We can't afford to buy a place. We're like renting at our noses. We have a kid now. And it's like long term, do we see ourselves renting forever? Do we see ourselves like having to deal with the school systems there? Like it is in the amount of time that we were there, I saw it change a lot. I wouldn't say it's for the bad or for the better. I think it's just a changing city. Um, a lot of people get upset that it does change. I think that's just part of the identity of San Francisco. It's always changed, and every new generation has offset the previous generation. And you go back, it was a Navy town back after the war, and then it became a beatnik town, and you had all the poets and Jack Kerouac and Ginsberg, and then the hippies came in and chased out the beatniks, and then the yuppies came in and chased out the hippies, and then the tech boomers, and now is my everything is like always the new person's fault, and now it was my fault, and for 9 years you read articles about how I'm the villain in every narrative, and it's my fault that rents are expensive, and it's my fault that people are getting gentrified out. And it's a hard place to live for that. So some of it is like the guilt of, not the guilt, some of it, let me rephrase that. I think some of it is just like the strain of seeing a city start to, let me think. So here, I'll put it this way. So my friend has this good saying of like, you should never live in a city for more than 10 years because as after that grow to sort of you grow to sort of hate it because you're there long enough to watch it change around you and you get mad about these things, and there's nothing wrong with you, but you sort of just grow to hate the things that are different. Yeah, like San Francisco, I'm very happy we lived there for as long as we did. And there, now that we're away from it, like I get nostalgic and I miss it and I get homesick. And I have a Facebook portal, of course, and it's playing a bunch of photos that I have. I started. a few years back, I started a daily photo project, and I did it for a little over 3 years, and then I took a year off, and then I started doing it again recently. So I have, it's like a couple, little over 1,000 photos, and a lot of them are just of SF, that I had done every day in a row. And, it's like my old commute, and it's coming up, and it's my old coffee shop, and, our neighbor's garden, and all these things that are just coming up, and it's constantly there reminding me. And it's really nice, and it's like very like emotional sometimes. And especially right now with this lockdown, my wife and I will be sitting in the living room, and like, our favorite ice cream shop will pop up in a photo. It's like, oh, like I wish we were in SF. But I don't, and I'm really glad that we did this move. It was it was always a dream to live abroad, and we were at a point now where we decided, especially with a kid, that we don't think San Francisco was the right place to be long term. I think if we we basically said, a couple years into living there, like if we got stuck here, we wouldn't be unhappy. And there's a very short list of places that I think we'd really want to live in the States. But I don't think long term, like it's still what it was to me in the beginning. It does feel like a stopover town for a lot of people. And this is like a very controversial topic, and for people who grew up there, it's their home, and a lot of them are now being priced out, and it's just like it's a very hard problem. It's really difficult to build there, which is why things are getting priced so expensively. Like there's an immense regulation. People could fight almost every new building, because they see it as a beacon of a new era, and they don't want that because this is their home. So I understand, and I have empathy towards that, but it's also really frustrating because I'm trying to make it my home. I have a child. We can't make it a home because we've sort of been made to feel unwelcome. We can't buy because we're priced out. We can't ever quite get the feeling that they had for it. So, I got this recruiter email. My son at this point had just turned a year old, and it was for a company in London. And I almost deleted it, and then I went and talked to my wife, and I was like, "How would you feel?" And she's like, "Talk to him. Like, let's see what the hell happens. Worst case, maybe they'll bring you out for an interview and you get a free trip to London." Um, and I was like, "Okay, like that sounds exciting." Like we had always talked about moving to London. It's not that easy to do. Even as an American, like the visas are really hard to come by. You have to find a company to sponsor you. There is a pretty significant pay difference where it's a lot less payout here. There's a lot of things that make it hard to just up and move. Um, we're not part of the EU, so it's difficult. Um,
I think there is a saying
yeah.
that one of the harder thing in the life, which could be, is actually moving to another country. That it's a big stress, just no matter where you have born and where you move into.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was so much work, and they literally held my hand through everything. Like I couldn't imagine. I've always I have a lot of empathy towards anyone who immigrates anywhere, especially people who do it for the betterment of their family. I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in a very predominantly working class neighborhood. I grew up working in restaurants, so like the Mexican, Central South American immigration is like a very real thing, and I grew up around it, and it's something that's very dear to my heart. Is like I know these people; these are good people. These are people who are just trying to do better for their families. A lot of my friends when I was a kid were first generation. Their parents, my best friend when I was a little kid, his mom was from Costa Rica, and his dad still lived in Costa Rica. And he saw his dad 3 times a year. And like now as a father, I can't imagine what that would be like. But like I feel for that, and I always have, and I think that has influenced a lot of who I am, both politically and um, just that type of thing. So having gone through the process where someone literally held my hand, I can't imagine what it would be like for a refugee to try and go through it with no lawyers, with no one representing you. Um, So yeah, I guess back to how we ended up here. The one company, I started talking to them. I knew someone who worked there because we had worked together at Twitter. Um, so by the time it got to getting close to an on-site, and it felt like, okay, they're gonna fly me out there, I emailed this Facebook recruiter and I was like, hey man, still not interested in working in Menlo Park because I don't want to do a 2 hour commute, but I'm going out to London to talk to another company. Like, do you have anyone I could grab a coffee with? I'd love to hear about what's going on at Facebook London. And he was able to like fast track stuff. They got me through the first couple rounds of interviews in like a week, and then they extended my trip, got me for an on-site, and at the end of the day, it was like the right match. Facebook was through the whole process super supportive. They really held my hand through the immigration stuff. They had like no problems with the fact that we had a kid. The kid was actually a big deciding factor too. I guess I didn't really talk about that much. We had decided we decided if we were going to do it, now's kind of the last time because he had just turned one. You know, he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't speak. He doesn't really have opinions. So it's like if we're gonna do a big move, that's like a big scary thing, especially for a kid. So if we do it now when he's young enough, it would have far less trauma on him. And honestly, like he didn't know, he didn't care. He was just happy to be around his parents. So it sort of felt like if we were gonna live abroad, now is the last time to do it for a very long time. It was like the last opportunity. So Facebook came in. They really held our hands through everything. We moved in October, and we've been here basically through the winter, and then now through quarantine. Uh, we had been to London quite a few times before. The agency I worked at, Beyond, they were based in London. Their HQ was in London, so I had a lot of friends through Beyond that I still talk to. One of the groomsmen in my wedding is actually a buddy who lives here in London, who was living in. He had just moved to SF for like 3 months when we just moved there, and we became super close. We're hanging out all the time. Um,
The world is small.
so yeah, it is. And now he's got two kids, and like, we don't see him as often as I'd like to because they live kind of south of London. But like, when we do, the kids run around, and like my son goes and chases, and it's really fun. So it is the world is small. Don't be a jerk. That's like I said earlier. You can't be an asshole because someone knows someone who knows you.
Yeah, yeah, this is the rule. Yeah. So which part of the product are you working on? I mean, on Facebook.
Okay. So at Facebook, I work on a product that they have called Workplace, which is basically like a Facebook for work tool. And I'm doing product design for, sounds really fancy. It's our content foundations and machine learning team, um, which sounds really cool on paper. What it kind of boils down to is the news feed and the way that we decide to show content and when it gets shown. There are a lot of super smart machine learning people on the team who do stuff that I don't understand. Um, but my job is to sort of help you create content and then help you consume content at the right time. Um,
And the rocket
and
science
that's
is
what.
behind by those great guys.
Yeah, yeah, those great men and women who are just doing this incredible like stuff, computer science. They go and they put it in the computer science box and they do a bunch of really smart stuff, and then computer science comes out and it does the thing that I was like, hey, what if we were just really smart and did this? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So yeah, they do all the hard work. I just make it easy to use.
Yeah. And just in a nutshell, what kind of responsibilities currently do you have at your work?
Yeah, I think at the expectations of a product designer at a large company is that you're pretty involved through the entire process. So I help along with like you kind of have the Triforce or even the four people who are like really leading in it's engineering, product, design, and then we have like our PMMs or product marketing managers. And we all together will be the ones who kind of help identify problems. So from the beginning, we're looking for things that we can improve, and that can come from anyone on the team. Um, so as a product designer, a lot of times I'm like, here's a thing I really want to fix. So I'll take that to the team and I'll try and get it into our workflow and our backlog. And a lot of the times that's how you just get the things that you want to get done. And then from there, um, my job is to basically like work with research, work with PMs to sort of hone down a problem to what we think a solution could be. And from there, you usually will have to then visualize it. So at that point, you kind of want to validate things. It depends on the scale of the product or project. You usually kind of want to validate, and that's where research can come in again. So you'll build a prototype, or you work with some engineers to build like super like a really high fidelity prototype if you need, or you can build some, whatever level of prototype you need. It kind of depends on what you're trying to figure out. Um, and then it's my job to prototype. It's my job to get the designs like pixel perfect. So really, at that point, once we validate things and you've proven that like, okay, this is a good solution to a problem that we know we have, or a good solution to an idea that we have, then you work with engineers really closely to make sure that they actually execute it in a way that is up to the quality that you have, and the quality that you expect. So a lot of the times you'll need to dig into like code, or just give them like little snippets of, okay, I see this padding is 8 and it should be 12. And like really get that, like the last 5% that takes 80% of your time. um, so like your job as a product designer on a company like this is basically like from the beginning of identifying problems all the way to the end of like making sure that it's actually out there in a way that makes sense and it looks good. So I do visual design, we do user experience, we do prototyping. You kind of do the whole shebang. Yeah.
Yeah, this is cool. It's never-ending story because I think just two different approaches between developers and designers, how they see the final result. Because one side is more like functional wise, okay, it's working, that this is final, and like designers are normally about more neat and precise thing.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your engineers too. I mean, one thing super valuable is just like investing in those relationships. One, because a lot of engineers are just cool dudes and cool women. Like, there's a lot of just cool people out there. So like, don't not talk to them just because they're an engineer. Because one of my best friends is an engineer, and he's just a backend engineer, but he's a great guy. Um, so don't write off engineers. But the other thing is, we used to, so the term tone deaf, where someone just like you can't hear a tone. They're just okay. So this term tone deaf is like you listen, you can't really hear a tone. You sing, you don't know that it's off. You can't tell if you're sharp or flat. So I like to use the term eye deaf, which is basically like they don't see that it's not the thing that you gave them. Um, they're like, what do you mean? It's got all the buttons. It's got everything. It's got all the words. Like, job done. And some engineers are just a little more eye deaf than others. And some engineers I worked with are great. Some engineers I worked with are better designers than I am. It's like building those relationships and talking with them. And yeah, some engineers are brilliant and they're just eye deaf, and they don't see that they didn't do the thing that you gave them. So you just gotta spend some more time like polishing that stuff.
Yeah, but this is fine. This is the process. So
Yeah, exactly. It's good. It keeps us all employed. If software was easy, and we wouldn't have jobs. Like,
right.
it's hard and it's never done.
How do you manage your daily challenges at work?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. As I've gone through my career and I've seen I keep seeing the same challenges that every company I've ever worked with. And it all comes down to like if you get a lot of people in a room, it's hard sometimes to make decisions.
Yeah.
And the more people you get involved in any product or any project, like the harder it is. So when you scale up to tens of thousands of employees, like sometimes getting decisions takes a long time because you have to be careful to make sure that let me rephrase that. Like getting to decisions is hard because you always have to assume that everyone else you work with is as smart as you and is doing the diligence that you're doing. And when you don't do those two things, you end up building some really frustrating situations. When I was really early in my career, I was very strong-headed, and I was like, I'm a great designer, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to show them how they're wrong. They've done all these things incorrectly, and I'm going to show them the right way to do it. And that is not at all the way to get people to agree to your stuff and to build it. Um, you really need to like assume that they're as smart as you, or probably smarter, and they're doing the same diligence that you are. The more people you get involved, the more sort of stepping on each other's toes that happens within a product. Um, and that's happened literally everywhere I've worked, is that it's really hard to define a line of what ownership is, and I don't necessarily think you should. You can't be like, oh, Josh, he owns the entire timeline. That's not scalable. Like, of course not. Um, so like other people are going to do things that you were probably working on. You need to assume that they're as good as you are and that they're making the right decisions and they need to do the same of you and like that's been I think one of my biggest learning curves is like getting over that initial young strong-headed like I'm a good designer, I know what the hell I'm doing, they're what the hell are they doing, come on. um yeah, it's taken I don't know, I don't want to say it's taken me a long time, I would just say it's been a long process of like learning the best ways to navigate as you get into these larger and larger orgs. Um, and as you get further in your career, a lot of it becomes about like that. A lot of it becomes about how you can get a lot of people to agree and go forward. Um, these big leaders of like design industry, they're not necessarily they're almost guaranteed not pushing pixels. They're not the ones designing really cool interactions and buttons, but what they are doing is they're getting a lot of people to agree on a thing. And that's an incredible skill that's really hard to do. Uh, and it's just something like the further in your career you get, the more experience you get, the better you are at like getting people to come together.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the most challenging and important skill I think to develop.
Yeah, that's it. It's one of those funny things. Like early in my career, I focused so much on craft. I was like, I want to be the world's best designer. I want to do this just visually amazing stuff. And then the further in my career I get, the less important the craft is. Craft is foundational. You need to have that, and I'm glad I focused a lot of time on that. But that's not the important shit. Like the important shit is the people stuff. Like knowing how to navigate people, that is some of the hardest things you can ever do and some of the most like rewarding and the stuff that I look at some of these leaders and I'm like they're really good at that. I need to get better at that. Yeah, being a critic is like I think one of the easiest skills that anyone can learn, but giving good feedback is really really hard. So I used to always say it's really easy to shit, it's really hard to ship. So like you can shit on any product, and that is like the easiest thing to do is shit on some team and some product. But you know what? It's really, really hard to actually get something out the door that people will use.
Do you have any kind of practices and trends which you consider as inspiring for you?
Uh, I mean, one of the things that I think is amazing, and I'm seeing a lot more of now, is the trend of sharing, and sharing. I should say the trend of sharing process. So this was something that like a few companies, like Airbnb was really good early on, where they started a good design blog and they posted to it often, and they talk a lot about their process. And from the outside, when you're an early designer, you look at these companies and you think like, oh God, they're just really, really good and I'm bad. And like they just have a bunch of super brilliant designers in there, and they go and they open up Photoshop or Sketch or Figma and they just shit out genius. And that's not the case at all. Like all of this is a long process with a lot of people involved. And I think I see more and more companies now talking about the process. And that to me is one of the most like exciting and inspiring things that's happening in design right now. Is like people are talking about the process. Like when I was in school, like I said, like the idea of being an app designer wasn't a thing, but now you can become an incredible designer and you don't even need to go to school. There are so many people who share tips, who are talking about process, who are talking about things that they did wrong, that like it's so easy to actually learn from these amazing people because they're sharing it. And I think it felt like there was a sea change a while back. At some point, people didn't want to share because you were worried about giving away your secret sauce. Like, I don't want to tell you how I did this thing because then you can do it and you can knock me off. But I think that's changed a lot. And I feel like people are much more open to how they're doing things now, um, because I'm not developing any secret sauce. Really, like if I inspire some other designer who's really good who comes in and maybe they'll go join a startup and it takes off, or maybe they start a company, and like this is great. This is better for all of us. Like it's helping the entire sort of design ecosystem to have more really good designers out there. So I just think that to me is one of the most like exciting things I've seen happen in design in the last 10 years is just this movement towards being open and being transparent and talking about the challenges that we all face and all of the versions of uh like iterations that we went through to get to this one little circle that we did. Like that's what's cool to me. It sort of demystifies this idea of like the design genius, you know?
In online education, there is also a trend of sharing, which was not usual not long time ago. Like for example, masterclass, the this product, they are
Yeah.
making a great job and involving people which you cannot imagine 5 years ago that I know this actor or this producer or someone will just make online courses, like make online classes. You cannot imagine that,
Yeah.
and now it's possible.
Yeah, like Gordon Ramsay teaching me knife skills. Like, really? Gordon Ramsay? Like, amazing. Yeah. Or, yeah, Martin Scorsese doing like, hey, you want to be a director? Let me show you some stuff I do. Like, that seems like that's incredible. And I feel like for years, everyone liked the creatives like to hold your cards so close to your chest because you were worried about someone ripping you off. Um, and now it feels like that trend is just changing so much, and people are being more open and they're talking about their process and they're talking about it being a process. Um, and the idea of like the uninhibited genius, I do think is dying, which I like.
Finally.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Do you have any thoughts or any ideas what will be the upcoming future of social media?
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a good voice of authority on it, but I do think there's some things that I've seen as the internet has sort of matured. And, going back to the early days, there was a big sense of anonymity on the internet, and we would share anything we wanted to on MySpace, and it felt like there was no repercussions ever. And then shit got real at some point, and we're starting to see the realities of like a super connected world where all of your information can be available to anyone. And I think we're seeing more of a shift back towards the idea of like communities. So I already engage in this sort of unknowingly, but like my Twitter followers, the people I follow on Twitter, it's majority tech and designers, and that is just a community. It's a professional community. And we go out there and we talk about our struggles, we talk about our successes, we celebrate each other, but it's really just a community. And that wasn't what I was using the internet for in 2003. I don't think that's what a lot of us were using it for, but you're seeing that more often. It's not just designers, it's architecture community, and then you got freaking bird watching community, you got wine community, you got all these different communities, and they're like celebrating and talking to each other. And I think that is like I do feel like that's a trend that's going to continue to go up. Is things are going to become more community focused, more niche, and it may be around your profession or your hobby or whatever it is, but like communities are huge. And obviously, working at Twitter, I saw that. Working at Facebook, while I have nothing to do with any of that, you certainly see this. And my wife and I bought a Peloton last year, and she is super active on the Facebook Peloton group. And like there are people that do these little like swarms, which are kind of like just they all decide to like ride one ride together at the same time. And like she doesn't know any of these people. It's just she's active on the community because it's something that we're like enjoy doing. So I think communities are really where a lot of like this idea of social media will be going. There's always going to be a need for connectedness, especially with family. I live abroad. uh, my parents and my wife's parents are all in the States, and we have a kid who's turning 2. So like I think of being able to talk to them 15 years ago would have been so hard. It'd been really expensive phone calls or just emails. Being able to talk to them now, I can literally video call them and keep them up to date. And like that's what social media started as, was this idea of like table stakes, being or this idea of being able to connect with friends and family. Now that's table stakes, and we're moving past that. Like, of course, I can FaceTime my mom now. Of course, I can hop on a portal and call my wife's parents on their portal, and they can read a bedtime story to my son. Like, that is table stakes. That's not what it's about anymore. Now it's about communities and building on each other. And you've seen this, like, the Arab Spring, that was all built on social media. Black Lives Matter was all built on social media. These are just big communities that have come out of social media. Um, so that's an exciting thing that I think. I mean, I'm sure will continue, and I think that's something we need. The other thing is like AR and VR. I have no idea what the hell it's going to be, but they're doing some crazy cool stuff. And every time I like watch an Oculus release video, I'm like, what is these guys are way smarter than me. They're doing way cooler shit. This is something that, like, as a designer, I would love to get into AR or VR design. I don't even know what tools they use. I have no idea how you do it. It reminds me of like being a little kid watching like professional skateboarders on TV and being like, I can't even understand how you got the thing to do the thing you're doing, but it's
Entire
amazing.
magic.
Yeah, yeah, to me, it might as well be magic. I have no idea. I just know it's really cool and I like watching it.
One thing that I want to ask you also is, which skills do you consider as the most important for product designers?
So definitely number one would be empathy. Like you need to be able to understand other people's perspectives. Um, that will help you tremendously. And that's like, I think one of the number one skills as a designer is being empathetic towards what the user will actually be going through. And you need to be able to think through a lot of these different sort of scenarios, a lot of these different things that you probably personally wouldn't necessarily do, but you need to be able to understand why other people would. Um, One of the other skills, like I talked about earlier, is definitely like the people side of things. You need to be personable. You need to be able to build relationships. Some of the best advice I got early on in my career was buy the first round. Um, so basically, like put in the effort. Like buy the first round. Like put in the effort to build these relationships. One, because there's a lot of really cool, smart people that you work with, and they're probably great people, and you should get to know them. But two is like that's going to be one of the best things to unlock your career and be able to get the things you want built done. Like you without a team, no one's really launching anything. It's really hard to do it without like nothing that anyone has really built on the internet they did by themselves. It's built on top of something that someone else had worked on. Going all the way back to the invention of the internet, and like all these things are built on top of other people. So the relationships is really important, buying the first round. And I think the other thing is like you need to give a shit about the details. Like the details are what instill trust by your users. And when these details get lost or when these details just get sort of pushed away of like, oh, we'll fix it later, like that degrades your product. That degrades the thing that you're trying to do. And you spent so much time that like to not care about the little details and like the inconsistencies, like that's what people, whether consciously or not, they pick up on. So I think like really give a shit about the little details. Those are important. Of course you need to actually ship at the end of the day. You can't spend the whole time perfecting the drop shadow, but you need to care about what you're doing. And I think you need to give a shit. Um, I think another thing that really helped me, and this is a weird one because it's not like financially, it took me a long time to even get to a point, but I think travel really sort of opened up a lot of my perspective of the world because I had grew up in LA and lived in California. I'd only been to a couple other places. Um, so like I didn't actually leave the country until I was like 26, 27, something like that. So like the idea of traveling really, I think it will build empathy and it builds a part of your brain that's a really hard part to exercise. Um, so I think it's a lot about interacting with other people, meeting other people. You need to be able to kind of try and understand what their life is like, because those are the people that you're most likely going to be building for. Whether or not it's the market worker in Barcelona or the taxi driver in Tokyo or whatever. Like the point is, there's a lot of people out there with a ton of perspectives, and like getting out there and just traveling, interacting, like understanding how other people live. Even though it's not a design skill, it has helped me tremendously as a designer. I don't know. It took me a long time to be able to financially be able to travel, and I understand it's like like I get it, but I'm glad that I did, and I would gladly spend my money on experiences over things at any point.
Which digital or industrial product impressed you the most and why?
Um, so this is what I have two answers. One is going to sound like a cop out, which is the AirPods Pro, or AirPods Pro, I think. I know it's an easy answer, but honestly, it is one of the, aside from my iPhone, it's like one of the things that I use the most that I've bought. I use it every day on my commute. I had a problem before with my original AirPods, which was that the tube is really loud, and I found myself turning it up all the way to try and hear anything. And it was like damaging my ears. And they solved that, and they solved it really well. And normal noise canceling headphones, like I have a nice pair of Bose headphones. They're great. They're huge. I don't want to wear them on the train. Like they're sweaty. The train is hot. Like I wouldn't say the AirPods are the best sounding headphones I've ever used. Um, I won't. The only thing they do really, really well, or the best thing they do really, really well, is they fit in my pocket. It's incredible, and for what they do, they are noise canceling. They fit in my pocket. They've done an incredible job. I know it's an easy answer, but I still really think it's one of the things that I use the most. Other than that, I think there's two other things. One is I have a Leica M10. I'm really into photography, like I said. They haven't really changed the industrial design in like what 50, 60 years, and they don't need to. It's great. It is not an easy camera to use, but it is an incredible camera to use. I like to use the analogy, and it may not be a good analogy, but Porsche makes this car, and it has like no back seat, or no back, it has like no passenger seat, no radio, no air conditioning, no automatic locks, no automatic windows, like everything, and it is super bare bones, and it's not a comfortable car to drive. You don't want to take that to the grocery store, but it does one thing really, really well, which is go fast around a track. The Leica is kind of the same way. Like there's no autofocus. Like it's heavy. You got these big metal dials. It's clunky. I can't hand it to someone and be like, "Hey, excuse me, can you take a photo of me?" And my wife, like, because they're not going to know how to use it. It doesn't do any video, but it takes photos really, really, really well, really well. So it does this one thing really well. It is very much diminishing returns, but I love it. I take a photo every day. I take multiple photos every day. I post a photo of like a daily photo. So it is something I use every day. I've used it every day since I've owned it, and it's an incredible piece of machinery. I think the third thing I would say that I've been really impressed with, I guess I'm mostly going with uh, physical things, is there's this product called the SNOO. So it's for young babies. It's a bassinet, and the majority of baby stuff is pretty ugly. It looks, it's like bright colored and plasticky, and a lot of baby stuff is just not good looking. And I'm, I'm a designer. I like to have things that look good in my house. I'm fairly particular about those things. And the snoo, it's beautiful. It looks like an Eames chair was like a cot for a baby, and it's super smart. Um, it's got an app. It like automatically detects when the baby is crying, and it sort of like gently rocks the baby to sleep. And then if the baby starts crying, it'll rock it a little more, and it plays like sounds that sound like the mother's womb, and it plays like fake heartbeat. And if the baby keeps crying, eventually it sends a push notification to you, being like, "Hey, the computers give up. It's your turn." But like not only is it beautiful, it actually was really functional. And my son, it took him a long time to sleep through the night, but we put him in the snoo and we would be able to get a few, you get 3, 4 hours of sleep, which with a 3 week old baby is amazing.
Do you have any kind of recommendation for listeners? I mean, like any book or podcast or something that was inspiring for you recently and you want to share with?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a like podcast addict at the moment. Um, and actually, I will say one app to the previous one. One app I use a lot is Overcast, and I use it to manage my podcasts because I you can create different playlists and stuff, and it's great. I would say the podcasts that I keep going back to, they're gonna sound a little cliche and designery, but definitely like 99% Invisible, Radiolab is incredible. I've started listening to Monocle magazine. They do this morning 10-minute like news segment called the Monocle Minute, and it's like a daily podcast that you can sort of listen to every day. I listen to the Daily a lot as well from the New York Times, which is great. Um, and then I've been doing audiobooks a bit more, some parenting audiobooks, which are not going to be that exciting unless there's any new parents out there, in which case hit me up on Twitter because I got all the book recommendations. But one I've been listening to and I keep going back to is this book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. So she was a reporter in New York back in the 60s and 50s and 60s. And she fought really hard to sort of rethink the way American cities were being thought about and planned at the time. So there was this really big movement toward the like modernization of American cities where they were just building these great big highways for cars. And this guy, Robert Moses, who's kind of her arch nemesis in New York, was basically completely redlining entire neighborhoods to build new freeways throughout all of Manhattan and all of New York, really. So this book is her trying to shift the way that we think about the city as a entity, to not think about it from this top down 10,000 foot view, but from a ground floor view. And these neighborhoods that you're flagging as like need to be tear down and replaced with a freeway for cars, so that way we can urbanize or suburbanize the entire countryside. Like you're not just tearing out people's homes, but this is like a very rich integrated infrastructure that's happening. So I find that fascinating. I'm really interested in urban design as well. I think this is like a common thing that you find among product designers is we're also interested in industrial design, Like, we love furniture, we love urban design, we love transit, like we love architecture. They're all like, I think um, as careers and as like industries, we have a lot of very similar overlapping thinking. It's just comes down to like we execute differently. I do work with quite a few like former architects who've gotten into product design, or former industrial designers who've gotten into product design. And I think there's like a lot of overlap in the thinking there. So while the book is not about design, it really is about design. And it's a fascinating like dive. Some of her like references feel a bit dated because it was written in the 60s, but it's really good. I haven't finished it yet, but she's sort of like this like icon of urbanization in America, um, which as a trend is finally starting to happen. And like my generation is the first generation where more of us are moving to urban centers. And, by 2050, more than half the world's population will be living in dense urban centers. And these are things that I think is going to be like hugely impactful for our future. So I love reading about it, and I nerd out about this stuff. I think about like my son. I really think he probably will not need to drive. I think that the way the world is going, with the exception of the last month or 3 months or so, is like density really is like a shift, and it's happening. And like I don't think my son will need to drive ever. Like, he's turning 2. Like in 15 years, like will he'll most likely be living in an urban center, and if he does need a car, like at that point, autonomous will probably be becoming more and more of a norm. That I don't think he'll need to learn how to drive. But yeah, it's a long way of saying like it's a very interesting book that's about design that's not at all about design.
Last but not least, question is there something that really pisses you off, just in general or in the world or in community, or that really makes you angry? If you
Yeah,
don't like it, do you have any ideas how to improve it, how to make it better?
yeah. I think as a design community, we can be very fickle and very mean. And we like to talk a lot about empathy for our users, but sometimes, especially, and I'm probably talking about design Twitter, but that's not the only place that this happens, um, is that we have very little empathy toward our peers. And people will launch a thing, and we love to just shit on it. And we love to talk about how bad this new thing that this company launched is, without realizing that, like, there are real people who are, if not your friends, friends of your friends who worked on this thing. And like we have very little empathy for the amount of like thinking and effort that can go into it. And we, like I had said earlier, about like assume that the people that you work with are smart and are making like good decisions. Like you should definitely assume that the designers out there are smart and are trying to make good decisions. And I think we have very little empathy for each other. That's not to say we shouldn't call out bad decisions when they're made. And I think there are plenty of bad decisions that need to be called out. There are things that companies I work for or have worked for at the time, there's decisions that leadership has made that I don't agree with, and I will be very vocal about that. And these are things that like we should be calling out, but like don't attack the designs of the thing. Like attack the leadership, attack the fact that designers probably don't have the amount of say that you think they do. Like attack the entire like process that leads to these things being put out there. Not, oh, this is bad and I don't like it and whoever worked on it is stupid. And that's what we like as an industry. We can be very fickle about these things. I think that's what like really frustrates me. And it's like we like to talk a lot about empathy and empathy towards our users, but like I don't see us exercising a lot of that toward even our peers. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, and it's a hard balance of calling out what needs to be called out. Um, it's like the difference of like shitting on something versus like a well-structured critique.
Yep.
Um, like I think Mike Davidson does a very good job of this when he does call out people. He called out Superhuman. He did it in a structured way. He didn't assume they were mean. He didn't assume they were dumb. He just gave them feedback, and he like the way that it ended up going was probably not the best because people get defensive and all that, but like you need to structure it in a way that is helping push the conversation, not just making someone feel bad. So I think, yeah, I would say that's the thing that like really bums me out. And then there's the obvious like I miss being able to walk outside and like getting groceries delivered, and coronavirus is killing a lot of people. And yeah, I'm like, am I gonna have an economy when all this is done? And like, is my son gonna be able to go back to his daycare? And there's all these things that are like, it's a very weird time in the world. It's a very scary time. And there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of things that like we literally just have never been through before. So I don't even have something to look to. Like everyone I think we keep looking back to the what was it 1918 flu epidemic. Um, but that was a different time and it was a different type of flu, and it's just there's no real like analogous thing to compare it to. So I don't know what the hell's gonna happen. It's scary.
It's really bloody 2020. I have no other, term to say about this year, but this year it will be tough.
Yeah. But that's getting really dark. How about maybe let's focus on like design Twitter thinking about each other a little more and like critique what leads to these decisions being made and like the lack of real seat at the table a lot of designers may have, as opposed to saying you're bad because a thing got launched that I don't like.
Yeah. It's time to close this episode. It was really great to talk to you.